The audience sat in eager anticipation, their eyes locked on the stage. Tonight was different. The energy in the studio wasn't just excitement, it was expectation. They had come for a spectacle, and they were about to get one. On one side of the table sat Rebecca Lane, a fierce liberal talk show host known for her sharp wit and relentless criticism of conservatives. On the other, Donald Trump, a man who had never backed down from a challenge. The tension in the air was almost electric. The cameras rolled, the lights brightened, and Rebecca, with a smirk that hinted at the battle she thought she was about to win, leaned forward. "Well, well, well," she said, her voice laced with sarcasm. "We have a Trump on my show." Laughter erupted from the audience. Rebecca sat back, satisfied. The opening jab had landed. But across from her, Trump simply adjusted his tie, his expression unreadable. He had faced tougher crowds before. He had faced tougher opponents before. And if Rebecca thought she had the upper hand tonight, she was about to learn a lesson she would never forget. Then, without missing a beat, Trump leaned forward and delivered his first counterpunch. "You know, Rebecca," he said, a slow smirk forming, "I've been in rooms full of world leaders, CEOs, and the toughest negotiators in the world. And let me tell you something. None of them had to rely on cheap applause to make a point." The audience gasped. The game had changed, and Rebecca knew it. Rebecca's confidence wavered for only a second before she regained her composure. She had prepared for this. She was ready to go toe-to-toe with Trump. "Mr. Trump, you've always claimed to be a man of the people, yet your policies have been called divisive, outdated, even dangerous. Do you think history will remember you as a visionary or as a mistake?" More laughter from the audience. She had delivered her line perfectly. It was the kind of moment that would be clipped and shared across social media within minutes. But Trump just chuckled. "Well, Rebecca," he said, shaking his head slightly, "you just proved my point. You didn't ask a question. You set up a headline, and that's the difference between real journalism and entertainment posing as news." The audience murmured. Even some of Rebecca's most loyal fans weren't expecting that response. She pursed her lips. "I think it's a fair question, Mr. Trump." "And I think it's lazy journalism," Trump shot back. "But go on, I'm curious to hear what other brilliant insights you have." Rebecca wasn't about to let him take control of the conversation. She quickly pivoted to another topic, one she was sure would put him on the defensive. "Okay, let's talk about your stance on immigration. Many believe your policies have been heartless. Some even say they go against basic human decency. How do you respond to that?" Trump exhaled sharply and leaned forward, his tone turning serious. "You know, Rebecca, it's funny. People like you sit in these fancy studios, sipping lattes, talking about what's heartless without ever facing reality. Do you know what's actually heartless? Parents forced to send their kids on dangerous journeys because politicians in this city refuse to secure our borders. Heartless is ignoring the victims of crime committed by people who shouldn't even be here. Heartless is choosing political correctness over protecting American lives." Silence. Rebecca hesitated. She hadn't expected him to be this direct. The audience, sensing the shift in power, fell uncomfortably quiet. This wasn't the easy takedown they had been expecting. Rebecca needed to take back control. She forced a chuckle. "Well, you certainly have a way with words, Mr. Trump. But let's be honest, don't you think empathy should play a role in politics?" Trump nodded. "Absolutely. Which is why I fought to bring jobs back, to lower taxes for hardworking Americans, to make sure families could afford to put food on their tables. But tell me, Rebecca, how much of your own money have you donated to struggling families? How many policies have you written that actually helped someone in need?" Her face reddened. "Because I'll tell you what, I didn't come here to play a villain in one of your little late-night comedy skits. I came to talk about real issues. If you want to debate, let's debate. But if you just want to perform for your audience, I'll let you finish your monologue." A few audience members clapped. The energy in the room was shifting. Rebecca let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, Mr. Trump, always the showman." Trump smirked. "Takes one to know one, doesn't it?" Rebecca had one last chance to regain control. She adjusted her earpiece, signaling to her producers. "All right, Mr. Trump. After everything, do you really believe you've done the best job possible as president?" Trump paused for a moment, letting the tension build. "You know, Rebecca," he said slowly, "history will decide that. But I'll tell you what I do know. People like you will spend years trying to rewrite history, trying to spin narratives, trying to tear me down. And yet, here I am, and here you are, still talking about me." The audience gasped. Trump leaned back in his chair, completely at ease. "Now, tell me, Rebecca, who really won tonight?" The room erupted into applause, not just from Trump's supporters, but from people who had come expecting a one-sided takedown and instead witnessed a masterclass in commanding the stage. Rebecca, for the first time in her career, was speechless. As the show cut to commercial, one thing was clear. Trump had just turned the tables, and the entire nation was about to talk about it. The studio's bright lights flickered back on as the commercial break ended, illuminating the tense atmosphere between Donald Trump and talk show host Rebecca Lane. The audience, once filled with eager anticipation, was now in a state of silent curiosity, their eyes darting between the two figures seated at the table. Rebecca, who had begun the show with her signature confidence and wit, was now shifting uncomfortably in her chair. The break had given her producers time to strategize, feeding her instructions through her earpiece. Control the narrative. Regain the upper hand. Don't let him take over the show. Yet, as much as she tried to mask it, Trump had already seized control. He sat back in his chair, exuding the calm confidence of a man who had spent decades in high-stakes confrontations. He knew the game better than anyone, and he had mastered the art of turning an attack into an opportunity. Rebecca, on the other hand, could feel her grip slipping. She had underestimated him, thinking she could steer the interview with cutting remarks and sharp jabs. But now, she was the one on the defensive. Taking a deep breath, she forced a smile and turned back to the cameras. "Welcome back. Before the break, we had a very spirited discussion with Mr. Trump. But now, let's shift gears a little." She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the desk as if setting the stage for something light-hearted. "Mr. Trump, you've certainly made headlines over the years. Some say you're one of the most influential figures in modern politics. Others say you're the most controversial. How do you feel about that?" Trump smirked. He saw through the attempt immediately. "Oh, Rebecca, that's cute. You think if you soften your tone, you'll catch me off guard?" He chuckled, shaking his head. "Let me tell you something. I don't care about being controversial. I care about results, and that's something people like you in the media never seem to understand." The audience erupted in laughter and scattered applause. Rebecca's smile faltered, just for a second. Trump wasn't just holding his own, he was thriving. Rebecca flipped through her notes, searching for a way to turn things around. She had one final card to play, the one her producers had prepared just in case. It was a classic media trap, designed to paint Trump as disconnected from the struggles of everyday Americans. She took a slow breath and composed herself. "Mr. Trump," she began, her tone shifting to one of measured seriousness, "many critics argue that while you speak for the working class, you don't actually understand their struggles. You live in luxury, fly on private jets, and have billions in assets. Meanwhile, families across the country are struggling to pay rent. How do you respond to those who say you're out of touch with real Americans?" She folded her hands neatly, believing she had finally found his weakness. This was it, her moment to corner him. Trump, however, didn't flinch. He leaned forward slightly, placing his hands on the table, and locked eyes with her. "Rebecca, let me ask you a question," he said, his voice smooth but firm. "How much of your salary do you donate to struggling families? How many jobs have you created?" The audience murmured. Rebecca blinked, caught off guard. She hadn't expected the question to be flipped back onto her. Trump continued, "You sit there in your multi-million-dollar studio on a network owned by billionaires, and you pretend to care about the people while doing nothing for them. Meanwhile, I actually built businesses. I created jobs. I cut taxes. I put money back in Americans' pockets. And what do? He gestured toward her dismissively. "You sit here asking gotcha questions for ratings. Congratulations." A few gasps filled the room. Rebecca's jaw tightened. The power dynamics had shifted once again, and everyone knew it. The audience wasn't just entertained anymore. They were captivated. They leaned in, watching the battle of wits unfold. Rebecca, usually the composed and dominant force on her show, was struggling to maintain her footing. Even the crew members behind the cameras seemed frozen, unsure whether to intervene. She tried to recover. "Mr. Trump, this isn't about me," she said, attempting to redirect the focus. "This is about the American people." But Trump shook his head. "No, Rebecca, this is about the truth. And the truth is, people are tired of being lied to by the media. They see through the manipulation. They see through the games. And they definitely see through people like you who pretend to be their voice while doing nothing but talking." The studio erupted in applause. Rebecca clenched her hands under the desk, forcing a neutral expression, but the frustration in her eyes was undeniable. This wasn't just a discussion anymore, it was a public reckoning. Rebecca cast a desperate glance at the teleprompter, hoping for guidance, but her producers had gone silent. There was nothing left to say, no planned pivots, no scripted comebacks. Trump sat back, watching her with an amused expression. He had seen this play out many times before. "You see, Rebecca," he said, his voice almost casual now, "you don't actually want a conversation. You want a moment, a clip, something to twist for your show's next highlight reel." Rebecca tried to interject, but he raised a hand. "But guess what? The American people are smarter than that. They don't need a talk show host to tell them what to think. They see the truth for themselves. And tonight?" He glanced at the audience, then back at her. "They're seeing you for who you really are." The air in the studio was thick with tension. The applause that followed wasn't just from Trump supporters, it was from people who respected honesty. The producers signaled that they were down to the last segment. Rebecca swallowed hard. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to be in control. With no other options, she forced a smile. "Mr. Trump, I'll give you the final word." Trump adjusted his tie, leaned into the microphone, and said, "Well, Rebecca, it's been entertaining watching you try, but at the end of the day, people don't care about your gotcha questions. They care about leaders who fight for them." Silence. Then, the loudest applause of the night. Rebecca inhaled sharply, holding back the irritation bubbling inside. She had lost. The moment she thought would embarrass Trump had turned into one of the most talked-about television moments of the year. As Trump stood up, buttoned his jacket and prepared to leave the stage, he turned to Rebecca with one final smirk. "Good luck with the ratings, Rebecca." And with that, he walked off, leaving her sitting there, stunned, while the internet was already exploding with clips of her downfall.